Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hello, okay, there we go. Come on, buttons, fighting with me here every time. I'm getting a double tap out of the button when I just need a single tap, and then a single tap when I need a double tap. And hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? Microphone, screw you, whatever. Hang in there with us for the next 2 hours, microphone. And you too, listening in, I would say Radio Land, but it's not quite that either. Tuesday, January 7th, 2025, time for another show. Almost time for another administration. Things went as expected yesterday. I don't think there was any interruptions. I didn't even actually. It's usually the sort of pageantry I'll sit and watch, but it was rather disturbing, knowing what the outcome was going to be and knowing that there wasn't going to be anything interesting happening anyway. The Electoral College votes counted yesterday. Nancy Mace injecting herself into the discourse via social media, insisting that there was some threat today or yesterday, and they somehow overcame it. I guess she was sort of commenting on the fact that there was a little bit of snow in the area. I mean, I guess it's a significant amount of snow for this area, but for most of the country, or large parts of the country, they would probably, look, you can drive to work in 6 inches of snow. It's not a big deal. And she took the time to post something on Twitter saying, come hell or high water, we are going to certify the election for our President Donald Trump today, like it was as though there were some threat like there was last time to whether or not that would actually go through. And with a, rather frightening looking selfie accompanying it, I guess we know which came. It wasn't high water that showed up, and it was an either or proposition. So I guess it must have been hell. And Nancy Mace just can't miss an opportunity to inject herself into the conversation, I guess. By the way, remember that 4 short years ago, she was there on January 6th, 2021. And remember, one was at that time positioning herself among the normie Republicans who were actually opposed to overthrowing the government and having an insurrection. And they were a little bit frightened about what was going on exactly. But according to her staff, she found a way to turn the situation to her advantage. She thought she wasn't able to execute this thing, but she was looking and messaging her staffers. I want to find a way to get myself down there and maybe, on video, get punched in the face by one of the protesters so that I'll look like I don't know what. I guess I don't know what's that supposed to do for you. I mean, it would have been epic video to have now of Nancy Mace being punched in the face for no particular reason. I guess I'd watch that video, but I'm not certain what she was hoping to produce with it. Anyway, it doesn't matter now that she's gone super MAGA wackadoodle. I imagine she would erase that video and try to erase it from our memories as well. All right, much to catch up on as usual. And I guess an open deck to do it with. One thing I missed yesterday, and I should have spoken to Greg about it, and we can talk about it tomorrow. The shameful way in which the United States often ignores happenings in our neighbor to the north, or our neighbors to the south, or really our neighbors to the east and west, across oceans, wherever you happen to be. Americans will ignore you. In Canada, there are political developments which, because I'm not Canadian, I don't particularly understand what's going on. But the news is that Justin Trudeau has resigned as prime minister or as party leader or both in the face of upcoming elections, which is, again, one of those things that here in this country, well, you don't resign in advance of the elections or even announce it. There's a planned obsolescence for you, and the election will make you irrelevant eventually. But I have reporting from Reuters and from The Hill that will help me figure out what's going on and remind you that, yeah, we need to pay attention to these things. And, of course, remind you that Donald Trump, who's supposed to be becoming president of the United States in 2 weeks and has had practice at doing it, had a 4-year practice run not all that long ago. Likewise, well, I don't know. I actually can't tell the difference whether he really doesn't know what's going on most of the time or is just making things up. This time he's just making things up. I think I can tell that much. But here's the news part of it. As Reuters reports under the headline, Canada PM Trudeau is likely to announce resignation, source says. Well, it was so likely that, in fact, he went ahead and did it. The source was right. Oh, look at this. Here's a last name for me to try to pronounce. The author of the Reuters piece from January 5th, you see how far behind we are, 2 days, is David, I assume this is Lundgren, or Lund, I don't know whether they say it as though, or Lundgren, but there's no D in it. And in fact, it is Ljungren. Those Canadians, they're so crazy with their surname. Clearly, well, I mean, there's no Canadian surnames, obviously. But I mean, well, it could be any number of languages involved in that one. I assume it's Nordic in some way. It's not so terrible to deal with. I'm sorry, David, but let's hear the news as you reported it anyway. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is, you see we're a little late to this news, increasingly likely, how do you like that, to announce that he intends to step down. He's even hedging that. Though he has not made a final decision, a source familiar with Trudeau's thinking said on Sunday. Well, he's increasingly likely. He's 100% likely to do that now, we can say. The source spoke to Reuters after the Globe and Mail, that's the big Canadian paper, reported, and just one of them, too. It's got two names, but we have a few of those as well. Emerged, Globe and Mail, reported that Trudeau was expected to announce as early as Monday that he would quit as leader of Canada's ruling Liberal Party after 9 years in office. I didn't even realize how long he'd been there. The source requested anonymity because they were not authorized to speak publicly, and, you know, Canadians are shy. Trudeau's departure would leave the party without a permanent head. Right? You're going to need a head, right? Permanent or not. At a time when the polls show that Liberals will badly lose to the official opposition Conservatives in an election that must be held by late October. That's actually quite some time away for foreign elections. I don't know. I'm used to only the American elections taking that long and everybody else doing a really good job being super efficient. And even having the election in October is pretty super efficient. Remember that I have seen people joking, we are 3 years away or less from the Iowa caucuses, or Iowa straw polls anyway. I guess they begin pretty soon, actually. Anyway, sources told the Globe and Mail they did not know definitively when Trudeau would announce his plans to leave, but they said they expect it would happen before an emergency meeting of the Liberal legislators on Wednesday. Today is Tuesday, and I guess it has happened before Wednesday, hasn't it? An increasing number of Liberal parliamentarians, alarmed by a series of gloomy polls, and that's all it takes, I guess, to throw a Canadian legislator off their game, gloom, have publicly urged Trudeau to quit. The Prime Minister's office did not immediately respond to a request for comment outside regular business hours. That's nice. They have good work-life balance there in Canada. The Prime Minister's regularly published schedule for Monday said he would participate in, virtually, he would participate in a cabinet meeting on Canada-U.S. relations, which are themselves virtual at this stage of the game. It remains unclear whether Trudeau will leave immediately or stay on as Prime Minister until a new Liberal leader is selected, the Globe and Mail report added. So you see that the system is a little bit different there. He leaves the Prime Minister's office by virtue of having left the leadership of the party that holds the majority of the seats. I know. We know nothing. I know nothing. I'm not even sure I'm saying it correctly about what's going on. But that's my understanding of a parliamentary system. And I would say I should get used to it because we may one day all have to flee to Canada, except that may be off the table soon as well. Trudeau took over as Liberal leader in 2013, just by way of background, when the party was in deep trouble and had been reduced to third place in the House of Commons for the first time. If he does resign, he does, it would likely spur fresh calls for a quick election, I suppose that he did, to put in place a stable government able to deal with the administration of wackadoodle Donald Trump. over the next 4 years, or however long he lives. We should just throw that in there with every report. The Prime Minister has discussed with Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc whether he would be willing to step in as interim leader and Prime Minister, one source told the newspaper, adding that this would be unworkable if LeBlanc plans to run for the leadership. I guess they want somebody to just step in as a caretaker. Trudeau, 53, had been able to fend off Liberal legislators worried about the polls and the loss of safe seats in 2 special elections, but calls for him to step aside have since grown since December, which was, like a week ago, when Trudeau tried to demote Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland. We've actually had to report on Chrystia Freeland before, haven't we? One of his closest cabinet allies after she pushed back against his proposals for more spending. Wow. Freeland quit instead and penned a letter accusing Trudeau of political gimmicks rather than focusing on what was best for the country. Trudeau propelled the Liberals to power in 2015, promising sunny ways. Okay. And a progressive agenda that promoted the rights of women and a promise to fight climate change. Sounds good. I'd vote for him. But the everyday realities of governing gradually wore him down, and like many Western leaders, the need to deal with the effects of the pandemic ate up much of his time. Although Ottawa, we'll give it a little twang there, spent heavily to protect consumers and businesses, racking up record budget deficits. Wow. This provided little protection from public anger as prices soared. So it's the cost of eggs, I guess. Probably the same, just like here. A botched immigration policy led to hundreds of thousands of arrivals, straining an already overheated housing market. Okay, a little bit of reflection of American problems in Canadian politics. The update I put aside just yesterday that will give a more American flavor for those of you listening from America or in Canada who just don't want to hear any more Canadian news without us also telling you something about Donald Trump. And I know there are lots of you. Here's the headline in the United States now, a day later, and the Trudeau resignation announcement having been made. Trump pitches, quote, merged U.S., Canada after Trudeau resignation announcement. That leave it to Donald Trump to jump in there. I mean, I do think that Trump is probably smart enough to be able to tell you, if you were pressing him on it, that just because the Prime Minister of Canada has resigned doesn't mean it's like open season on Canadian sovereignty. And now he's out, and he was against merging the Canada and the United States and making Canada the 51st state, or, presumably if there were ever any kind of a political union, it would be like, 20 states. I mean, I don't know how you want to divide up the population, but some larger number than just one, for instance. That would be a pretty big state. But I assume he knows that that's not something he can do automatically, or the fact that there's no prime minister's office or no prime minister at the moment, or he plans to resign when somebody else steps in, or any sort of signal of transition isn't like, legally speaking, it's up for grabs. There might not be a country at this point, but I'm not positive, because I also think he is actually losing his mind along the way. And he was stupid to begin with. But I think he knows very well that this is just trolling, and is going to, play the dopey American because you can never tell, and you got to treat him with kid gloves. And he's not president yet. So that, it shouldn't matter very much. It should worry you for later. But this is why Trudeau is probably very happy to get the hell out. Anyway, here's the story as reported by Lauren Irwin, whose name is not that difficult for me as an American to pronounce. Good, great, although we need more diversity over there. Okay. Anyway, President-elect Trump pitched the idea of a merged United States and Canada after Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced his resignation, noting there would be no tariffs if the two countries were one. Okay. I mean, by the way, unless he decided that there should be. Ordinarily, we understand that there are no tariffs in between states within the union. But I suppose if Trump decided that it was really, really super important that there be tariffs on people in New York, if you want farm products from our red states or any other products from our red states, or we just feel like stealing money from you, we can now have tariffs for you. Ordinarily, we understand the Constitution to stand in the way of that, but to hell with that. Trump is very smart and says that we should do this, and so therefore we will. Anyway, if Canada, this must be Trump saying, if Canada merged with the U.S., there would be no tariffs. Taxes would go way down, and they would be totally secure from the threat of the Russian and Chinese ships, capital S ships, that are constantly surrounding them. Trump posted to his Truth Social site. Together, what a great nation it would be. And so great, in fact, that it warranted 3 exclamation points. Trudeau announced on Monday, that's yesterday, that he would be resigning before general elections later this year. So I guess it's not a done deal, but he's announced that he'll do it. And I don't know, probably the record up there in Canada is if you say you're going to resign, you actually go and do it. His Liberal Party is polling poorly as tensions with Trump have risen over the issue of tariffs. That's interesting. So Trump threatens tariffs, totally innocent of anything, any wrongdoing. The ruling party in Canada says, "Oh no, that would suck. What an a-hole. He shouldn't do that. You're out." Really? Okay. I mean, I assume that there were other issues going on here, but this is the way Trump will see it. That Trump said, "I'm going to take over Canada, and we're going to have tariffs," and he's changed the government there. And interestingly, if they now deliver up a conservative government, he will claim credit for having I'm going to just change governments around the world by yelling at them. And he'll believe he did it, too. And his troops will believe that he did it. Anyway, Trudeau goes on to say something, I guess, kind of normal-ish. This country deserves a real choice in the next election, and it has become clear to me that if I'm having to fight internal battles, I cannot be the best option in that election, Trudeau said. And that makes some sense. And again, it's no sign that he thinks that the Liberal Party can't continue to govern effectively, but it doesn't sound like he thinks, or the pollsters think, that the Canadian voters are going to give him a chance to do that. Now, after Trudeau's announcement on Monday to bring it back to us, because, Trump and America were very important, Trump touted the idea that many Canadians would, quote, love, and that's in all caps, love the idea of being the 51st state of the U.S. He said the merger would be beneficial for the U.S. because it would, quote, no longer suffer from massive trade deficits and subsidies that it provides to Canada. A little bit of a warped view of how things work. Justin Trudeau knew this and resigned, Trump said. That's his view of things. He's never been super comfortable with Trudeau, who Melania has the hots for, as it turns out. And you can see it every time they're together, and I guess that bothers him. Trudeau has served as Canada's prime minister for 9 years and led the Liberal Party for 11. He has faced mounting crises, including the resignation of a top minister and a confrontation with Trump's 25% tariff plan, among other issues. Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland criticized Trudeau in her resignation, saying he was pursuing, quote, costly political gimmicks as Trump threatens tariffs on the neighboring country. I'm not certain what she had hoped to see Trudeau do about Trump making a wild out-of-the-blue threat about tariffs, except to say, well, no, or we'll retaliate. I'm not certain what she really expected there. Anyway, Trump trolled Trudeau last month as Canada's, quote, governor after they had dinner. He's so nice. He also criticized Freeland for what he described as totally toxic behavior. Okay, so he's not on your side either. Trudeau said he would retaliate if Trump went through with the tariff hike and said it would be more difficult for the two countries to work together. That's probably true. And it's probably going to be true for the next prime minister, no matter who it is. With Trudeau's resignation underway, Canada's Liberal Party will be hosting a competitive race to find a replacement. Liberal legislators will host an emergency meeting on Wednesday. That's tomorrow. So, all right, the Canadians are going to jump right into it and figure out what to do next. And I I don't know if there's a Canadian, the Canadians know? Is there a Canadian, I'm sure you know, do Canadians have a Trump-like figure whom he might want to take control of the country? I assume there's at least some conservatives, or maybe some a lesser party, perhaps, experimenting with a Trumpy persona. So I'm not sure who that might be, and whether, they may have no shot whatsoever at leading their party, or at their party gaining enough seats that they would be in a position to become prime minister. But I don't know. I guess Steve Bannon is probably analyzing it and looking for some Trump-ish figure that they could push for taking over. And I don't know. I don't know whether Steve Bannon actually has any interest in pursuing the stupid idea of merging the two countries. But if so, all the Americans who worked hard over the past couple of years to escape the second Trump administration and move to Canada as refugees will be quite disappointed, I would imagine. And probably hunted as well. All right, a little coffee break here. The coffee arrived a little bit late in the preparation process, and I hate to see it go to waste. Now, on a Wednesday, I could be allowing Greg to chat and carry the show and mute the microphone and have a couple sips, but not to be this morning. All right, so I think we got something else in the hopper here that might provide a good follow-up. I actually, just in scanning the Daily Kos front page this morning, and I really have to add, is it Uncharted Blue, Hunter, and a couple other, a large number of former front pagers from Daily Kos. And you remember that people used to rotate in and out of front page duties all the time. But a few people who have rotated out and I think since parted ways with Daily Kos, who have gathered under the banner of Uncharted Blue, including our own Joan McCarter, who has had a couple pieces published there, but a number of names that you'll recognize. I should make them a part of the morning sweep, which, I don't know. It takes me a long time to implement a new part of the routine. But anyway, over at Daily Kos, I caught this headline, and I wondered whether it might make a good segue here. No, Trump is not eyeing pared back tariffs, Alex Samuels writes for the Daily Kos staff. And let's see where this is coming out of. President-elect Donald Trump on Monday poo-pooed reports, and he poo-poos just about everything every day, as far as I am aware. Many people say there's an air of poo-poo all around him, most of the time, in fact. But on Monday, one of the things he poo-pooed was the reports that his aides are considering a watered-down version of his universal tariff plan. I didn't realize it was universal. Sources told the Washington Post that Trump aides were reportedly exploring a new tariff plan that would affect every country but cover only so-called critical imports. This seemed to suggest a strong pivot. Ooh, everyone loves a pivot away from Trump's initial plan to impose tariffs across the board, including a 25% tariff on all imports from Canada and Mexico, which was just plain stupid, but there it was. But Trump dismissed the Washington Post's report as fake news in a statement posted on Monday to his Truth Social platform. He also suggested he'll make good on his earlier promises, which also include a 60% tariff on Chinese goods. I didn't even know that number had been thrown out up until now, but the numbers change all the time. That's one of his favorite things. In fact, it's 6,000%. Anyway, the story in the Washington Post, quoting so-called anonymous sources. I mean, they were anonymous sources. It doesn't matter what so-called. They're so-called sources, I suppose, but they are definitely anonymous to us. But this is interesting. So, quoting so-called anonymous sources which don't exist. So I see what he means. Okay, they're so-called sources really, because they didn't exist. Either AI bots or his accusation is they didn't even bother to get sources and then protect them with anonymity. They just made up the quotes that they wanted so that they could do fake news and attack Donald Trump. And at this point, I wish they would, but I don't think that's the actual practice. But the story in the Washington Post, quoting so-called anonymous sources which don't exist, incorrectly states that my tariff policy will be pared back, Trump wrote. That is wrong. The Washington Post knows it's wrong. It's just another example of fake news. That Trump would move forward with his plans for universal tariffs is not all that surprising. Alex continues. The president-elect's fixation with tariffs and his plan to impose them on the country's largest trading partners was arguably the centerpiece of his economic message during the 2024 campaign. I guess so. And that there was no other economic message to be found. And in fact, no other message whatsoever except I hate immigrants. And he combined the two to come up with, say, a housing policy. What will your housing policy? What will it be? How will you address the housing shortage? We will round up all the brown people who live in houses and throw them out and then give them to white people, and that is how we will do it. And also maybe a tariff. I don't know where the tariff comes in on that, actually. Anyway, even many voters and Republican lawmakers reported opposition to Trump's tariff plans haven't deterred him. We have learned along the way, nor has the fact that his plan could ignite a global trade war. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's just one of the things that can happen. That's like your opinion, man. Anyway, the tariffs and tariffs alone created the vast wealth for our country, Trump posted to X this past Friday. Then we switched over to income tax. We were never so wealthy as during this period. Tariffs will pay off our debt and make America wealthy again. You know, basic misunderstanding of the historical precedent plus everything else. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I was trying to do a little bit of preparation behind the scenes. I'll tell you a little bit about it in a minute. But where were we? Oh, yes, right. Trump saying Canada sucks. But also, we were reading about how, no, his tariffs are totally going to remain the same, even though nobody knew what they were going to be, and neither did I. And the number changes all the time. And anybody who tells you different, it is fake news unless it isn't. And according to the Washington Post, you know, the fake stuff, the Trump team's preliminary plan for tariffs included levying a tax on certain sectors deemed critical to national or economic security. Though it wasn't clear which specific industries would get hit the hardest, early discussions apparently focused on sectors such as the defense industrial supply chain, which affects aluminum, copper, iron, and steel, critical medical supplies like syringes and vials, and energy infrastructure like batteries, rare earth minerals, and solar panels. And by the way, as I see this thing developing here, I mean, I'm hopeful. Well, No, I'm not. But you would think that the journalism community would come to understand what's happening here, which is that at no point during the campaign did Trump actually articulate a coherent tariff policy. But they attempted to normalize it and sane wash it and turn it into a policy by trying to nail down numbers that he had blurted out somewhere along the line. I'm sure totally unvetted. And as he vets it and works it through with his, to the extent that he does it at all, with his own policy team, the numbers change because the numbers were stupid and baseless to begin with. And then numbers change, and then he changes the numbers, and then his warped brain takes over and he gets the number wrong, and he reverses digits in the numbers or multiplies them by 10 or whatever, and then has the gall to say when it may or may not be nailed down at all. But if they nail it down and say, well, we said 25% during the campaign, but Trump just blurted that out and he didn't vet it with us at all, and now that we've worked it through, it's actually going to be more like 20%. And then if the paper says 25%, he'll say, that's wrong. That's fake news. I told you, these people don't know anything about my policies. But nobody knows anything about your policies. You don't know anything about your policies. There are no policies. I mean, this is just Trump creating chaos and confusion and then pointing at everybody else and saying, you're the ones who are confused because you're the ones who are trying to nail things down and make it look like there's an answer, and there's no answer. So isn't this really your fault? But I would just like to point that game out. He's never told anybody what he's going to do. He's never checked with any of his advisors. He's never said he was going to do the same thing twice. But anybody who's like trying to be responsible and say, here's what the guy who might be the president next for however long his brain holds out and he actually lives, and this we think is going to be his policy because his dying dementia brain keeps saying wrong numbers and different words, and sometimes they're English and sometimes they're not, but here's what we think he's saying. And then, that can't really be it because it's gobbledygook. Plus, even if it was right, he would come out and say we were wrong and fake news. And it's almost like, stop trying. There's no benefit to you. And just as there's no benefit of trying to do right by him, there's no benefit in trying to stand up and do the right thing because you'll get clobbered for it. But, the rest of us maybe kind of benefit from it. But I don't know. There's no benefit to anything anymore. We're all doomed. I know it's a terrible doomsaying. What I really meant to say is there's no point in trying to be on his team either, because everything Trump touches dies. He's a face-eating leopard. He doesn't care about anything but, do you have a face and should I eat it? Can I eat it? I don't care what you've done with it. If you've been one of the biggest Trump supporters in the world, if your face suddenly turns delicious looking, he's just going to eat it. We'll get to that later. But anyway, you should note for the record that everything that Trump touches dies, and everybody who tries to explain Trump will eventually be attacked by Trump for their failure to understand Trump, even though Trump doesn't understand Trump. You get it? Okay. So according to the Washington Post, they tried to make sense of this thing. That made him mad, and he said, go to hell, you're fake news. But they tried to, figure out the numbers and which countries would be hit and what items, what kind of imports would be subject to tariff, things that businesses and the rest of the country and the rest of the world might want to know. They tried to figure out, and I hate you, so you're wrong. The sector-based universal tariff, it then says, is a little bit easier for everybody to stomach out of the gate. The thought is, if you're going to do universal tariffs, why not at least start with these targeted measures? One of the people familiar with Trump's plans told the Post, and it would still give CEOs a massive incentive to start making their products here. Again, attempting for Trump's sake, I think, to try to sane wash him, and that just ends up making him angry and saying that you're not a real source. Despite Trump's denial, the report raised hopes in financial markets. Why? The back and forth between Trump and the Washington Post led the U.S. dollar index down and then back up again slightly on Monday morning, According to Business Insider, the U.S. dollar pared its losses to roughly 0.5% after Trump blasted the report. Again, people trying to make their living based on divining what the demented idiot Trump has to say. Economists, however, have blasted Trump's tariff plan, saying it would raise prices. Retailers such as Best Buy, Lowe's, and Walmart, they're fairly large. They kind of have some idea what's going on. They are already poised to raise prices in anticipation of Trump's tariffs. Meanwhile, an August estimate from the Peterson Institute for International Economics, PIIE, P-I-I-E, I guess. I don't know. Do they ever use that? Pi, but with an extra I. There is no I in pi. We have two I's in pi, and we're watching you at all times. The nonpartisan think tank found that Trump's tariff would cost the average U.S. household more than $2,600 per year. Oh, no. According to ABC News, clothes, electronics, and toys will be most impacted by Trump's tariffs if implemented. In other words, the Trump Christmas tax. You should know this. Trump has admitted he likely won't be able to lower the costs of groceries in the coming years. Now prices on everything will just get even worse. So anyway, no, I'm not thinking about paring back tariffs. I'm thinking of quadrupling them, and they were already going to be quadrupled. And as you know, that means 100 times larger, because that's what quad means. Okay, sure, whatever. On the, crazy Trump front, we have this news. Trump's going to be in court making motions again. Oh, no. And I guess we've kind of reached the point where he's already like, well, I'm just going to set myself up as a dictator again. And here we go. As you know, Jack Smith is headed for the exits. Trump having won, he certainly would fire Smith if Smith hung on for long enough, but it was announced that his intention, Jack Smith's intention, to leave office before Trump's inauguration. But as you know, he was the special counsel assigned to investigate, well, a number of things, and he ended up indicting Trump and had been prepared to press forward with a case on his theft of confidential and top secret documents from the White House, which he took and stored in the Pervolago bathrooms, and trying to overthrow the United States government just 4 short years ago on January 6th, 2021, through an insurrection and violent attack on the Capitol as he sat a mile and a half away watching it on television and eating snacks. Well, anyway, he was all set to wind things down and dismiss the cases because Trump's incoming Department of Justice will take care of that anyway. And as we understood it, it was more or less required by law that as special counsel, winding down the investigation and closing it out, a final report is due. You've been spending public money, investigating people of interest for a long time, and you're packing up and leaving for whatever reason. You're about to be fired, a new dictator is taking over, or you didn't find anything, whatever it is. You got to issue a report at the end. Tell us what happened. Well, of course, this report would tell us what happened. It would tell us how and where and when and in how many ways Trump allegedly, we'll say, broke the law in both of these cases, and would lay out we've already had the narrative laid out for us a couple of times, but this would be the last shot at it. And he would basically lay out all the evidence that he had collected and say, you've decided collectively, politically, that and legally that there's now nothing I can do for you, but here's the information I collected in exchange for my pay. It's what's done. But of course, that makes it a norm, and that means Trump hates it. So Trump wants it blocked, and he's moving on a number of levels to try and get it blocked. The most subtle, though the least, you would think the least likely to succeed, but you never know, given the players involved, is in the headline of this Politico piece, though the more important and frightening one is buried in the body of the piece. Trump urges Garland Like here you say, so what? I mean, I urge Pizza Hut to XYZ. They don't care. I am not. But Trump urges Garland to block release of Jack Smith's final report, the required one, which I guess, I'm sure there's a mechanism by which you can say, well, we'll either redact it or classify parts of it. But I don't think I've ever seen anybody just say, you know what, to hell with it. Don't report. And that's not necessarily what Trump is even saying here. He's saying you can report all you want. You just can't release any part of the report, or at least not the part I don't like the most. Meanwhile, our subheader tells us his two former co-defendants, that is Trump's co-defendants, want Judge Aileen Cannon, who's really not supposed to have anything to do with this case anymore at this point. It's in appeals. Want Judge Cannon, to order the Justice Department to keep the report secret, which, not usually done from the district court. Anyway, Kyle Cheney and Josh Gerstein have reported this, and as I said, it's alarming. Donald Trump and two of his allies are making a last-minute push to block Special Counsel Jack Smith from issuing his final report on his two dismissed criminal cases against the president-elect. Trump's lawyers wrote to Attorney General Merrick Garland, their great friend, I'm sure, on Monday, urging him not to release Smith's report, a 2-volume document that they were allowed to review in Smith's office over the past 3 days. So they've gotten a look at it. They think the public is, I don't know what, too something, too voter-ish, too volatile. Maybe they'll want to hang him. I don't know. Or they just don't want the embarrassment for their poor president. Anyway, but they think that the American public should not see it. At the same time, two of Trump's former co-defendants, right, have asked U.S. District Judge Aileen Cannon to block the Justice Department from releasing any report from the special counsel on the criminal case in Florida, where Trump was charged with conspiring to retain a trove of classified documents after leaving office in 2021. And let me tell you, he kept them. He retained them. We have photographs of them in the bathroom there, and that sounds worse than it was meant to, but it's documents. They're not doing anything. They're inanimate objects. They're in a bathroom, but they're not doing anything. But at any rate, we have pictures of them. It's not an allegation or anything of the sort. It was there. It's just a question of, can we punish him for it? And I guess the answer turns out to be no. In the letter to Garland, Trump's attorneys said that releasing a public narrative of the evidence that Smith gathered in the classified documents case, as well as in the federal election conspiracy case over Trump's bid to subvert the 2020 election, would illegally interfere with the presidential transition and be little more than a political attack. It's actually quite remarkable. And I mean, I don't really know how you interfere with the presidential transition. There's nothing going on that the release of this report can do to block the transition or to make it such that Trump won't be able to put his people, send his people to the Department of Agriculture to begin the takeover plans or anything like that. There's nothing there. But prior to the election, the claim was, well, anything you do will be illegal election interference. It will tell people something relevant about the election, and they'll use it to not vote for me, and that is therefore interference. But now that he's won the election and his election result has been certified, he now says, oh, well, but now you'll be interfering with the transition, which is just not a thing. But barring that, like if you don't believe in that, well, I'm almost president. I almost have executive power. That could be interfering with the executive power I'm going to get later, but which in fact I have now, and you should, for some reason, not be allowed to say bad things about me, even though that is not actually a part of the executive power now or ever. But maybe will be later, I suppose. But do you get that? This is a illegal bid to subvert the information about his illegal bid to subvert the 2020 election, talking about it would illegally interfere with the transition. Now, the decision about releasing Smith's findings, the lawyers wrote, and we should note for the record, these lawyers have already, it has been said, will be nominated to lead the Justice Department in 2 weeks. So these guys who are making these wild claims about what immunities do and don't exist will later be the ones telling the president, there's a memo from the Department of Justice that says it does exist. I wrote it. I put it there. I wrote it last week. But these are the guys, like we were saying yesterday, with Kash Patel able to fabricate evidence and plant it in FBI files. Now we have these two guys who are making these wild claims in court right now in a position to write DOJ memos that are supposed to set policy in the absence of clear law on the subject. So that's not great. But yes, so now the claim is if you release the report, it will interfere with the presidential transition. The decision should be left to Trump's administration, the lawyers say. Why? There's 2 good weeks of the Biden administration left. He's still president. They can make that decision. Yes, it's true that pretty soon it could have been Trump making the decision, but, if you wait long enough, Grover Cleveland could have been making the decision. But we don't do things that way in this country, unless we do. They called on Garland, just for added measure, to immediately fire Smith. He's going to resign within the next 2 weeks, but you should fire him immediately because, why? Because Smith, and this is a quote from their pleadings now, Smith has proposed an unlawful course of action. And because of that, you must countermand his plan and remove him promptly, Trump's lawyers wrote. Wow. Now, somebody in circulating this thing on social media has a screen cap of the conclusion and the concluding words. But you see it's really rather fascinating, except for the fact that it's extraordinarily dangerous what they're doing here. Because Smith has bad things to say, it should be illegal. Because Trump is in the middle of a presidential transition, and saying that he did bad things in between his presidencies and during the end of his first presidency is an illegal interference in his transition somehow. I mean, I don't even know what kind of argument you make. What is being blocked in the transition by releasing this information? Nothing. They're just saying that it is. And even if it was, nobody should care because it's not a government office. We have no interest in, we have some interest in that the transition goes smoothly just in terms of, it's good for the country not to be totally unstable, but we're going to be pretty unstable anyway. In fact, the closer we get to the Trump administration, the more unstable we become. But never mind all of that. There's no basis whatsoever for claiming that there's any interference, but we're going to claim it anyway. But not only that, because we claim it, that should make it illegal. And because we've said it was possibly illegal, it isn't. Because we're declaring it illegal, Jack Smith is planning or even seeking permission to do an illegal thing. And you can't ask permission to do an illegal thing and not get fired, right? So fire him. You see, they're just like bootstrapping this into a firing and prosecutable offense. If anything, it's a signal from the Trump administration that the lawyers who signed this pleadings, this motion, who are going to head up the Justice Department in 2 weeks, will be prosecuting both Smith and Garland if they don't pretend to agree that there's such a thing as interfering with the transition and that interference is illegal, and that because it's so illegal, it would be illegal not to fire the people who asked whether or not it's legal. And can we release this thing? I remember Smith is basically saying, I have the report. I'm supposed to release it. Is it okay if I go ahead and release it now? It's now criminal to ask because why? Because Trump made up in his head and his lawyers made up in their heads that there's an interference in the transition because of it. There isn't, and no one would care if there was. But this is amazing. He's now got executive power during the transition, which he very decidedly does not, and there's really no way to read it into there. So, you're just going to have like per curiam decisions from the Supreme Court saying, I don't know, yes, he does. Why? Well, based on what? I don't know. It's going to be embarrassing to try to come up with something, too. So it just is. Spokespeople for Smith and Garland declined to comment on developments because they're so civilized and love norms, I guess. Special counsels, who are appointed by attorneys general to handle politically sensitive criminal investigations, are required under Justice Department regulations to produce reports detailing their findings and charging decisions. These reports often generate enormous public interest. During Trump's first term, for instance, Special Counsel Robert Mueller's report, remember that one, laid out stark evidence of ties between Russia and Trump's 2016 campaign. I haven't heard him talk much about prosecuting Mueller, though. I wonder why. Maybe he just figures people are over it and he doesn't need to. Special counsel's reports are initially confidential, but Garland has pledged to release Smith's report to the public in some form, following the recent tradition of attorneys general of both parties releasing them. And then a discussion about hints about Smith's report. The letter from Trump's lawyers to Garland provides a few clues about Smith's conclusions. It notes that the special counsel, in describing Trump's 2020 election subversion effort, said that Trump, quote, engaged in an unprecedented criminal effort as the head of the criminal conspiracies, and that he harbored a criminal design. The letter was signed by 4 Trump lawyers, including Todd Blanche and Emil Bove, who I almost called Email Bove because it looks like that, but Emil Bove, whom Trump has tapped for the number 2 and number 3 positions in his Justice Department. They swiped at Smith for including in his report, quote, attacks on other anticipated members of President Trump's incoming administration. Well, they did illegal things. And they indicated the special counsel's report criticizes the social media company X, oh no, for resisting prosecutors' efforts to obtain data from Trump's account. According to the letter and a legal filing by the 2 remaining defendants in the classified documents case, lawyers for Trump and those defendants were permitted to review a draft of the report in recent days in what they described as an unreasonably rushed and limited process. However, they said they saw enough to blast Smith's report as one-sided and slanted. It's the prosecution's report. Now, what about Judge Cannon? How does that work? Well, the letter to Garland was revealed as an attachment to a motion filed Monday night by Trump's former co-defendants Walt Nauta and Carlos de Oliveira, 2 Trump aides who were accused of helping him obstruct the federal government's investigation into the classified documents he stole and stored, as they say, stored at Mar-a-Lago. Trump has used political funds that he controls to pay for the legal defenses of both men, and Trump has tapped Nauta's lead attorney, Stan Woodward, to be an assistant to the president and senior White House counselor in the next administration. The new emergency motion, and that's enclosed in scare quotes there, asks Judge Cannon to order the Justice Department not to release any report from Smith on the documents case. Cannon is a Trump appointee, of course, who was assigned to handle the case and frequently clashed with Smith's team before she dismissed the charges in July. So what's the problem? Why has she got any charge of it at all? The charges are dismissed. And anyway, it's on appeal. It's out of her hands. It's unclear, I don't know whether this article makes mention of it, whether she has any jurisdiction to rule on this, but she'll probably seize the moment anyway and say, if you don't think so, appeal. But the appeal will happen during Trump's administration, and I have a feeling it's going to go my way. It wouldn't ordinarily. I'd be rebuked horribly, slapped again, but not in the next Trump administration I won't be. So let's see, where were we here? Cannon is a Trump appointee assigned to handle that case, frequently clashed. Right, before she dismissed the charges in July. Lawyers for Nauta and de Oliveira argued that the release of the report would violate their clients' rights, since prosecutors are still pursuing an appeal to reinstate charges against the 2 men. If Cannon sides with Nauta and de Oliveira, she would deliver one last blow to the departing special counsel by preventing him from laying out the incriminating evidence he amassed in a narrative form just days before Trump returns to the White House. It's unclear, however, here we are, if Cannon has authority to rule on Nauta and de Oliveira's request. After she dismissed the case, ruling that Smith's appointment to special counsel was unconstitutional, the Justice Department appealed to the Atlanta-based 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. That court, not Cannon, currently has control of the case. So we'll see. Maybe there's law, maybe there's not. maybe Trump has executive powers right now. Maybe he doesn't. We'll find out at some point. I was struck by this last night and tweeting about it this morning. And here, Chris Geithner, in tweeting about it, has a screenshot, I guess, of the last page of the report. And we might as well just read this on the way out the door to the top of the hour break. The last page, right over the signature block here for the lawyers. Smith's proposed plan, they argue, for releasing a report is unlawful, undertaken in bad faith. I mean, it's required, and contrary to the public interest. No, on all counts. Smith's conduct also raises grave concerns under Article 2 of the Constitution, which they understand and we don't, right? Because it unlawfully encroaches on the executive authority of the incoming administration of President Trump to resolve the issues surrounding Smith's office in accordance with President Trump's commanding national mandate from the voters, which is also not true. But what a position to take. Smith's conduct raises Article 2 concerns because it encroaches on executive authority that currently rests in the hands of Joe Biden and very decidedly not in the hands of Donald Trump as president-elect. It just does not work this way. But in a couple of weeks, it will. And so therefore, thing. And not only thing, but President Trump's win was so commanding that he should have an extra 2 weeks of the presidency beginning now. It's not a thing. But these guys will be the new heads of the Justice Department. Okay. The time has come, they write, to put an end to this weaponization of the justice system and replace it with our own, I guess. How audacious is that? The time has come to put an end to this weaponization of the justice system and move forward constructively. No report should be prepared or released, and Smith should be removed, including for even suggesting that course of action, given his obvious political motivations and desire to lawlessly undermine the transition, which really cannot be undermined this way at all. But they are creating a crime out of thin air here and saying that he's committed it, and they certainly are signaling their intention to prosecute him for it. Where they'll find it in the books, I have no idea. If you elect to proceed with Smith's plan, we again respectfully request 1, notice of such decision prior to any publication of the draft report, allowing us to take appropriate legal action against you, probably, and everybody else, and 2, that this letter and Smith's meritless responses to the legal arguments set forth herein be incorporated into the report. No. Okay, come on, button. Jeez, wow, really fighting with this thing. I guess I can't do it with my thumb. All right, hey, welcome back to the very frustrating Kagro in the Morning show. I was just checking up on something. I told you I was checking on something in the last break, and I might as well spring it on you now. Now that we're through with this, although we should turn back around and just one more time scream about how crazy this new filing is. And here's what I came up with. We were talking about, you remember Canada? Yeah. Well, we were talking about that, and I was saying, well, I wonder if there is a preferred conservative Trumpy politician who Trump would prefer take over in Canada, and then he would lean on that guy. Like, don't take the job, dude, because he's going to lean on you to actually merge with the United States, and you're going to have to answer for that, and it's not good. But anyway, it turns out that there is such a person, although he's not quite Trumpy. There is a preferred politician, and let's see if I can get back to the ye old what will we call this thing? The deck that we're using, the deck blue for blue sky. Then I can roll back and find the information and add it to the roundup. Oh, okay. Well, I may have to read something else as well as I'm making my way through things here. All right, well, we'll open up a couple more articles and see if we can't get them back to it. All right, come on. Where's the information that I had sent in about the Canadian politicians. Okay, from Ad Karatic, who is following along and listening. And as I mentioned, following on, not only listening to the program, but following along on Blue Sky, and has sent us this information. Yes, there is, in fact, a person that they have in mind here, and he's got one of those names, and now we have to figure out how to pronounce it. But it turns out I'm not alone. Well, first of all, yes, it is Pierre, Poilievre. I'm not certain how we would have. Poilievre, I guess, is sort of the Canadian anglicization of the name, as it turns out. And he sent me this article explaining who the person is, and that's important. This is a what to know about Canada's opposition leader, Pierre Poilievre. And I don't know what there is to know about him yet, but perhaps we'll take a look. But Ad Karatic here says that he is very likely to be the next PM, not quite a mini Trump, but close, and that's worrisome. We can read what Axios has to say about it, but here's what I've got instead. I went to, maybe I'll just share it with you and play it on the air. It's a YouTube short, which I guess means it's like a minute long. And I looked it up myself quickly in the first break. I had 2 minutes. How do you pronounce this guy's name? Well, it turns out that the first hit that I came up with was a short video of just that. And I started to play it, and the guy who'd made the video, who's interviewing him on TV, says, lots of people have said to me, I don't know how to pronounce the guy's name, so it's a widespread thing. Let's find out how. But it's a minute long. They had to fill out the whole minute. So it's 58 seconds of talking about how they don't know how to pronounce the guy's name, and how lots of people don't, and how it's not even 100% sure how you would pronounce it because it depends if you're pronouncing it in English versus French. And originally, it is a French surname, and they pronounce it a different way in French. It's like a whole minute. And I played the thing during the break. It took me a minute to find it, and I'm playing it, and I'm like, when are they going to say his name so that I can quickly imitate it? And the answer is not before the show starts again. So here's the best I can do for you. One, I can read about who is this guy and what should we expect from him. But first, I guess we ought to play this thing, and you can see, right?
Jokes in one of her speeches.
Here we go. There you go. You can hear the audio from it, right? Here I am desperately trying to find out within a 2-minute time frame how to say the name. Now, it's already a crapshoot because usually you pull up one of those. Anytime you're looking for a pronunciation, you end up on the YouTube channel of the one, person or entity who apparently has spent eternity pronouncing every word in the world in every language, but in a French accent. Have you run into this guy? And he too. You can't just pronounce the thing. I guess you can, right? Though, isn't there? I think there is a channel on YouTube that's literally just pronunciations of the word, but you have to pronounce it several different ways or over and over again for people to imitate. So you can still make a 10-second video out of it, but this French guy or AI, I don't know what, just every one of them, to stretch things out. You'll know right away what I'm talking about, probably just from the description. But if you've ever heard him, we are looking today at how to pronounce the word for a very particular kind of garlic pickle in Poland. And the word we like to use for this is pronounced. But again, just get to it already. And you wonder, who is this French guy who's, busying himself preparing? I can't get myself to sit down and make one new fake commercial for my own show 3 years into this running of the ones I've got. And this guy is spending all day saying, the garlic pickle from Poland, in this region of Poland is pronounced, how is this possible? Well, anyway, here you go. This too is, how do you pronounce this MFer's name quickly? I have 2 minutes. This is what I got.
Jokes in one of her speeches about the fact that nobody knows how to say your name. And so I thought
Not
I'd
alone,
jump right
I
in
guess.
and ask you the tough question first. How do you say your last name? Because
All right. So now at that point, I was like, "Phew, good. How do you say your last name? Please, I'm going to jump right in. How do you say your last name? I'm sure he's going to say it, and then I'll be out of here, right? Nope.
I'll tell you, known you a long time, Pierre, that is a question that I get asked a lot by people who've started to notice you and aren't quite sure what you're all about.
And again, here, I thought, that's a question I get a lot. And that Pierre would then say, ha, ha, ha. Well, let me tell you, guy who is from the Toronto Sun and making a video, whose name I don't know. It goes like this. Nope, no way, he's not done, and neither is Pierre.
How do you say his name?
The simplest way for an Anglophone
here we
to
go,
say it
right?
is Poilievre.
Poilievre. So for us, we'll be saying Pierre Poilievre. Because that's what he's given us permission to do. But there's more, of course. But I didn't get to, practice Poilievre, because I was like, well, what are you going to say? How do you say it? Or how do French people say it? Tell me. Nah, there's still 30 seconds to go, man.
But it has been said many different ways. It's a name that comes directly from France.
Really?
My father's
You're kidding.
Grandfather
All right.
came from, so my
Proud of his
great-grandfather
heritage.
came directly from France to Saskatchewan. And so in France, they tend to
Sure.
roll the last R, Poilievre. But no one says it that way here. So Poilievre is fine. I'm easy with first name basis. At the end of the day, Brian, I don't care how you say my name as long as you know how to put an X beside it on election day.
Well, anyway, so there you go. I mean, that's not too bad. I don't know who Brian is, but he works for the Toronto Sun, presumably. Brian. Sometimes people say that, but nobody pronounces it that way. So Poilievre is the way we'll probably. I don't think I'm capable of Poilievre. And of course, I imagine that certainly Canadians would look at you funny. And probably French people too. They would say, you mean Poilievre? I mean, I know you guys are not pronouncing it in French. Don't try to do that. So, okay. So what do we need to know? This is nice. This is takes the emphasis off of how stupid we are in the headline, right? Usually they say what you need to know about Canada's opposition leader, Pierre Poilievre. But here, Ivana Sarek's article merely says what to know about it. Here's a thing that you could know if you wanted to about Poilievre. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's resignation from party leadership on Monday has put a renewed spotlight on his conservative rival, Pierre Poilievre. Now I want to do it just to troll him, but I don't think he cares, so it doesn't matter. Why it matters? Because Canada is a country and it's near us and we do things in conjunction with them, and it would be important to know who's the leader there. Although, I guess maybe that really wraps it up in a nutshell, right? In an American political newspaper telling us who the new Prime Minister of Canada is going to be. And I know they do this for every article, but they shouldn't, and that's why I think their format is stupid. But no offense meant to Canada, I think, because they do this with everything. But you literally are watching an American newspaper say, there might be a new prime minister in Canada. Why it matters? Because he's leading Canada. And Canada, what? I know, I'm sorry, Canadians. But like I said, literally we do this with everything, right? The United States has just detonated all of its nuclear arsenal in the silos and destroyed the population. Some 80% of the population has been killed or wounded. Why it matters? Tell me, please. Why it matters? Trudeau's resignation has ignited a search for his replacement in the Liberal Party, which polls show is lagging significantly behind a Conservative Party ahead of a general election slated to take place by October. Does that mean it can happen earlier? I guess so. What they're saying is, how do you pronounce the name of the guy who might become prime minister? Poilievre was quick to weigh in on the political fracas, surrounding Trudeau, writing in a post on X Monday. He was on X when he wrote this. This is what people used to, use shorthand for the illegal drug ecstasy, which I don't know what the kids are calling it these days, but he means Twitter. on Monday that liberals wanted to, quote, trick voters by swapping in another liberal face to keep ripping off Canadians. Well, all they wanted, I guess this is kind of Trumpy after all, right? Because all that's happening here is, oh my God, liberals wanted to nominate somebody for office. Our equivalent, I guess, of the primaries. Well, we're going to be participating in this election, and this is going to be our political leader during it. Well, how dare you attempt to name a different political leader, trying to trick them? Yeah, it's very Trumpy. The only way to fix what liberals broke is to elect common sense conservatives, Pierre Poilievre added. What is Poilievre's background? That's fine. They just do Poilievre. I know. He is 45 years old. Poilievre, 45. Not like Colt 45 or something. He's not a malt liquor. Poilievre, 45. Has led Canada's Conservative Party since 2022. He's like an ancient figure. And is currently running for Prime Minister. Born and raised in Calgary, Poilievre graduated from the University of Calgary with a degree in Calgary. Very good. A degree in international relations. Per his website's biography, Poilievre was first elected to office as a member of Parliament for the Conservative Party in 2004. He previously served as a senior cabinet minister in the government of Trudeau's predecessor, Stephen Harper. We all remember Stephen Harper, yes? His wife, Anaida Poilievre, Anaida, you tell me, Anaida Poilievre is a former political advisor. The couple married in 2017, each other, by the way, and have 2 children as houseboys. That's true. They also, these are offspring they're talking about, I think. What are his political views? All right. We should know. Poilievre's biography touts him as a lifelong conservative, champion of a free market, so he'll be anti-tariff, one might expect. Yes? In an interview released on Friday, Poilievre vowed to pursue the biggest crackdown on crime in Canadian history. He's going to go after, what's his name? Pierre Lafoot. But isn't he operating out of New Orleans? I'm not certain. He's a Captain Crunch's nemesis, the pirate. Anyway, I don't know. Snidely Whiplash is the one they're concerned with in Canada, if I'm not mistaken, right? So Dudley Do-Right will take care of the guy. We're going to double the number of Dudley Do-Rights, and we're going to make 2 of these hats this year. More Mounties, I guess. The biggest crackdown on crime in Canadian history, slammed the Trudeau government as radical and denounced wokeism. See there, he's a little Trumpy after all. We're going to cut bureaucracy, cut the consultants, cut foreign aid, cut back on corporate welfare to large corporations, he added. I will say about the consultants, somebody had a great headline on it yesterday. I guess it's been a problem for the Liberal government. Maybe they've been making liberal use of consultants. And that apparently that one of the consultants had just advised them to cut the amount of money that they use on consultants, which is amazing for a consultant to do, but it was kind of a funny headline as well. Anyway, they're going to cut all these things, so he claims. Previously, Poilievre has proposed cutting the federal sales tax on new homes valued under $1 million, Canadian dollars, to address the country's housing shortage. Poilievre has also railed against the Trudeau government's carbon tax, which was meant to help the country reduce its greenhouse gas emissions, because he's conservative and he doesn't believe in such things, I guess. The intrigue, what is it? It's here. While Poilievre's policies, that's cute, echo those of President-elect Trump, they notably diverge from Trump's MAGA goals regarding immigration. While Trump has repeatedly vilified immigrants and promised mass deportations, Poilievre has insisted that the Conservative Party is pro-immigration. That can't last. What is his relationship to Trump? If you believe Axios, well, why not? For the time being, right? it is this. While Poilievre is open to working with Trump, Trump can't be worked with. That's not what it says, but that's the underlying meaning here. While he's open to working with Trump, the Canadian politician has stopped short of fully embracing him. You can't get your arms all around that guy anymore. In response to Trump's repeated suggestions that Canada could become America's 51st state, Poilievre vowed last month that such a thing would never happen. Okay. Well, at least he's a serious politician. Poilievre said on the Jordan B. Peterson podcast, that's the same as the Jordan Peterson podcast. Can't fool me by using the middle initial. But basically now he's going on the Canadian Joe Rogan, I guess. I don't know. Is that a rough equivalent? I guess we have enough of him leaking into the United States. But Poilievre said on the Jordan Peterson podcast that he could strike a great deal. He's very Trumpy with Trump to increase Canada's oil and gas exports to the United States. You think? And make both countries safer, richer, and stronger. Sounds great. No thanks. But anyway, now we have that information about the guy. Plus we, took a great deal of time to figure out how to say his name. By the way, if you want to cut waste, fraud, and abuse, how do you say this guy's name? And the answer is Pierre Poilievre. Thank you. Video over. We just saved $1 million. I don't know why, but we're going to claim it anyway. All right. Let's see. Other things that I wanted to bring to your attention. Let's see. Why is this blue sky thing? Oh, yes, right. There's more court shenanigans from Trump. Shall we read a little bit about this one? Norm Eisen discussing this other development in court under the heading of breaking news. And remember, let's see, Norm Eisen, senior fellow at Brookings and legal analyst on CNN. And did we read his writing just yesterday from the Bulwark, or am I mistaken about that? Breaking. Trump has filed a purported, quote, notice of automatic stay. That's interesting. Of his criminal sentencing in New York, and announced that he will commence appellate proceedings unless the trial court exceeds. I call BS. And then there's a thread. Here is a large screen grab of the filings in New York, which says President Donald J. Trump, and he is not president, hereby provides, he loves herbys, hereby provides notice to the court and the DANY, District Attorney of New York, Danny, I suppose, with one N, that he will initiate appellate proceedings on January 6th, that's yesterday, 2025, to challenge both, one, this court's December 16th, 2024 ruling wrongly denying President Trump's post-trial presidential immunity motion, which arose from, among other established law and jurisprudence, President Trump's claim of presidential immunity based on evidentiary use of official acts. And two, this court's January 3rd, 2025 ruling wrongly denying President Trump's motion to dismiss pursuant to CPI, which I think is something presidential immunity. Anyway, what's happening here? This is the case. We didn't get around to discussing this, but Judge Merchan, I guess, has been considering the question of whether or not the currently scheduled sentencing for Trump's now months-old conviction in what we called for shorthand the hush money case in New York can go forward, given that he has been elected president. Now, he can't probably be made to serve a prison term, certainly not while he's president, but he is a convicted felon. The conviction is on the books. Sentencing has been delayed, but is still due. And Judge Merchan just the other day issued his opinion that the sentencing could in fact take place. And that was taken as kind of stunning news, and it was made its way around the internet very quickly. But it was very quickly followed on by the observation that Judge Merchan also said, my thinking is that while we'll have a sentencing, I could impose a sentence that doesn't involve any jail time, or I might in fact just suspend everything and say, I'm formally sentencing you because there is a conviction on the books and we have to close the loop on this, but nothing is going to happen to you. It's just, there's going to be no punishment. You've won the presidential election and successfully will avoid punishment for this, and I will, acknowledge that. So it doesn't really go anywhere, but it doesn't matter. Even that is too much for Trump. So he's applying for what he thinks should be an automatic stay. No decision needed. Just stop Merchan from not doing anything to me. Isn't that interesting? Well, anyway, it's a long screen grab, as I mentioned here, but maybe we should just read Norm Eisen's discussion of it. Trump filed a purported notice of automatic stay in his criminal sentencing in New York, announced that he'll commence appellate proceedings unless the trial court just gives up. If you don't just do what I say, I'm going to appeal. Here's everything that's wrong with this desperate attempt to avoid sentencing on Friday. First, Trump's, all right, let's see if we can't jump back to the view we had here. First, Trump claims that he's entitled to a stay because Judge Merchan wrongly denied presidential immunity. But as I detail in this thread, presidential immunity doesn't apply here. Remember, there was a big question, right? The Supreme Court said, well, there's generally presidential immunity, but if you're doing something that's not an official act, you're not, then you're not immune from that. Trump just says, well, everything's an official act. I say so. Well, I say you're wrong, says Judge Merchan. Well, we're going to appeal that you said that. We think we can get a court to say you're wrong, but we'll see about that. Presidential immunity, of course, doesn't or isn't supposed to apply to Trump's conviction for 2016 election interference and its cover-up because, with respect to the hush money thing anyway, because immunity only applies to official acts. And of course, there was nothing official about the 2016 election. Trump did the wrongdoing either before he was president or by falsifying personal business records, and neither act is immune. There is an article from CNN attached about explaining the immunity ruling from the Supreme Court. Second, Trump also argues he has sitting president immunity. He, quote, sitting president immunity. But he is, of course, not yet the sitting president. His claim that sitting president immunity extends into the transitional period while he's president-elect is nonsense. But he's doing it in this case, too. It's just like what we found in Chris Geidner's write-up. And Chris also says that the argument he's using in the Jack Smith part of the proceedings, the Jack Smith case, saying I have immunity while in transition, is also very much like his TikTok filings, that the government he almost leads but doesn't yet lead should be the one that's granted the power to make the decision on what to do with TikTok. And he's just erasing the last 3 weeks of the Biden administration. I mean, the date is the date. January 20th is a hard date for a reason, so that there's no question about who's president when. But he's just saying, I don't know, the court should just rule that none of that matters. It's really rather extraordinary. Some law and order guy he is. Anyway, continuing with what we're reading from I've lost my place with this because I've gone back and where have we lost the thread on Eisen here? I guess so. All right. Well, let's jump back and see if we can't find it again. Oh, nuts. All right. Well, oh yeah, that's right. It was here. Okay. We had it in pocket already. So Trump argues he has sitting president immunity, but he's not even sitting president yet. His claim, obviously, that he gets it while he's president-elect should be, obviously, on its face, nonsense. There is no such doctrine in American law. Trump is just making it up. What's worse is that his nominees for deputy attorney general and assistant to the deputy attorney general, the ones who are signing these papers, are his personal lawyers. Actually, what's worse is that they are going to be the nominees for these top-ranking Justice Department positions. Third, the motion attacks the testimony of Michael Cohen, but Norm says, I was there in court for every moment of his testimony. He told the truth and the jury believed him. That's kind of the end of the matter. The judge at the time and since, has repeatedly rejected the claims that Trump makes here about Cohen's lack of credibility, but they just state it as fact anyway. It's pleadings. They do those things. Trump attacking the jury system at its heart by putting his judgment above that of the jurors and the judge who oversaw them. That must be rejected out of hand, right? They're just saying, well, I know that the judge thought that the witness was credible. I know the jury came to the legal conclusion that the witness was credible, but I'm Donald Trump and I say he wasn't credible, and you need to you're making reversible error by relying on the findings of the jury. No, that is the furthest thing from reversible error. It would be reversible error to rule that something else happened other than what the jury found would be the reversible error. But, he's just substituting his judgment for not only findings in court, but for the law and judicial canon all by itself. Then Trump argues, and there's more to it, but we're about to leave for our last break here. Trump argues that further criminal proceedings in New York are automatically stayed, because I said so, by operation of federal constitutional law. Wrong again. There is no automatic stay. He is making this stuff up as he goes along, as he usually does. That's disturbing for someone who's about to be president and for a filing by soon-to-be senior DOJ officials. We need to say that, and loudly, and maybe even a little more after this.
Sup fam, it's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Just trying to keep up, but I have a fire hose of information incoming via Blue Sky. But we're, I think, about to finish up this thread from Norm Eisen, who said, not only do we need to be saying something loudly, I don't think it's going to make any difference, but we do need to be saying it. I could be wrong about whether it makes a difference, but it needs to be on the record. Yeah, it's pretty disturbing for someone who's about to be president and for his top DOJ officials to be making this kind of this level of making stuff up is really rather disturbing. Then finally, Norm says there's one thing that Trump gets in this motion that's not totally crazy, but he still gets it wrong. He asks for a stay of his January 10th, now set for January 10th, sentencing pending appellate review. And there's a screen grab of the conclusion that I guess makes this request. By virtue of President Trump's filing of appellate proceedings raising his claims of presidential immunity, all proceedings in this court are automatically stayed by the operation of federal constitutional law. In the alternative, even if such a stay were discretionary, remind you, this happens all the time. You appeal, or you make pleadings in the alternative all the time. So it's not by itself ridiculous, although it sounds very funny to the layperson. This is an automatic stay, just a simple execution of clear federal constitutional law. But if it isn't, you could stay it based on this. But that's exactly what they're saying. In the alternative, even if such a stay were discretionary, the court should grant such a stay. The court should vacate the sentencing hearing scheduled for January 10th and suspend all further deadlines until until President Trump's immunity appeals are fully and finally resolved, which should result in a dismissal of this case, which should have never been brought in the first place. Further, President Trump respectfully requests that this court notify the parties by Monday, January 6th at 2 p.m. whether the court intends to proceed with the sentencing hearing on January 10th, which should not occur, notwithstanding President Trump's interlocutory appeal on immunity to allow sufficient time for President Trump to seek an emergency appellate review. So we appeal this case, and you should stay this case automatically because we've appealed. Well, that's not how the law works. Well, then you should appeal. You should delay it on your discretion. And I want to let you know that if you won't stop it, one, we're going to appeal. And if we lose the appeal, we're going to appeal that appeal. So you should also doubly stop this thing. I don't really know where this is supposed to stop, but this is Trump's habit. He just says, let's just tie things up in litigation. And then if the Supreme Court were to say, listen, we're tired of this, Donald J. Trump, the guy who's about to be president, we are talking to you. This is the final decision on the thing that you have asked us about, and there is no appeal from us. You must XYZ. Donald Trump would then appeal that and say, you said I needed to do XYZ, but you said it on January 7th. It's now January 8th. Do I still need to do XYZ? And they would politely, maybe, point out there's no appeal that you can file. I know, but nonetheless, here it is. I have filed it. Well, we don't accept it. It's not a legal document. Well, I say it is. And I can't believe it. I'm going to file in another court suing the Supreme Court for a writ of mandamus, forcing themselves to accept my filing. Like, no, it can't be done. But we're going to have to go through court to tell you that that's crazy. I hereby sue the Supreme Court. I want to be Lex Luthor. I want you to start calling me Lex Luthor. That's not a thing that you can ask for. I mean, you can go through the name change process, I suppose, if you want to. No. I simply order it to be the case because I am going to be president later. I must have the power to order it unilaterally now. No. Well, then I appeal. But there's no appeal from us with the Supreme Court. Well, then I appeal that there's no appeal. You can't. Well, yes, I can. And as long as you sit there with your thumb and or gavel up your whatever and say, we have to deal with this like in a normal fashion. We have to issue a ruling or something and tell him he's an idiot, but we got to issue it in a ruling. Yeah, hit him with the gavel. Throw him in jail. There's no dealing with this guy. Chuck him off a cliff. And, his estate can sue. And maybe they'll recover, too. But in the meantime, you're done wasting your time with him. So here we are. He now says there should be an automatic stay. And even if it isn't automatic, you should give it to me anyway. And even if you shouldn't give it to me, I will appeal that you didn't give it to me. Give it to me. Hasn't Trump delayed accountability long enough? Norm asks. Well, sure. If he gets his stay, his sentencing will never occur. I strongly oppose a stay, and so does the interest of justice. You're probably right about that. But just, I don't know. It was an extreme example of what he does with everything, legally speaking. And I just thought I would remind you of it. So great. There you have it. There's more other things I need to tell you about. And I'm going to have to poke around and see if I can identify which is the either the most important path or an important path to bring to your attention. Gosh, there's a lot. How about this one? This is an interesting thing that we perhaps should keep an eye on. It's difficult for me to believe this ever becomes an impactful thing, but it's a good attempt. And who knows? And it's the concept is interesting, and it gets serious treatment here in the Washington Post. So let's take a look. The article is from just the other day and comes from, it's power being exercised by an unusual source. And what kind of power, we're not sure yet. The Vatican, that's the power we're talking about. The Vatican names liberal San Diego Cardinal Robert McElroy as the new D.C. leader. He'll now be the Archbishop of Washington. And that's interesting in its own right. And the article tells you why. Also interesting is when did they get away? It's probably like 30 plus years that they got away from the old style naming. When you're discussing cardinals, that they used to go by, well, their first, their I guess baptismal name, who is now known as Cardinal, whatever their surname is. But I always thought that was a weird construction. It sounded, of course, sounds the same as saying, well, when you become a cardinal, your new middle name is Cardinal. But that's not the way it works. But they used to say back when it was, when I lived in the New Jersey area, we heard about the Archbishop in New York, John Cardinal O'Connor. They used to say it, but it's in fact, I guess, supposed to be John. Like he's just John, aka Cardinal O'Connor. But anyway, they don't do that anymore. And now, instead of Robert Cardinal McElroy, although maybe they still do that at the Vatican, he's just, it's now modernized to Cardinal Robert McElroy, Cardinal being the title, and that's the way we construct things. Anyway, McElroy, known for a pastoral approach to migrants and the LGBTQ plus community, which is nice, will lead an archdiocese still bruised by a sexual abuse and mismanagement scandal. There is that. We're not getting away from that. But there's more to what's going on here. Michelle Burstein, Anthony Faiola, Stefano Petrelli, and Emily Wax-Thibodeau together. They had to have 4 of them on here, and I don't know how many of them are Catholic, but it sounds like maybe at least 2 or 3. Anyway, it could be all of them for all I know. The Vatican on Monday named one of the leading liberal prelates, did we say it that way, in the United States to run the prominent Washington area archdiocese, sending to the nation's capital as a second Trump administration begins a cleric known for a pastoral approach to migrants and for the radical inclusion, that's in scare quotes, of the LGBTQ plus community. That approach came through prominently as San Diego Cardinal Robert McElroy made his first appearance after the announcement. Speaking at the Cathedral of St. Matthew the Apostle in Washington, the new archbishop delivered a message of unity and gratitude, unlike the incoming administration, I guess. He thanked Pope Francis, celebrated African Americans as so foundational to his new archdiocese, and addressed its Hispanic community in Spanish. He also called for inclusion and stressed the importance of trying to understand the other, sort of a Christian approach to things. McElroy, who for a decade has headed a diocese running the length of California's southern border with Mexico, asked Americans to, quote, hope and pray, unquote, that the next White House administration is successful in helping to enhance our society, our country, our life, and the whole of our nation. But he acknowledged a possible contrast with the next administration's priorities on immigration. The Catholic Church teaches that a nation has the right to control its borders, and our nation's desire to do that is a legitimate effort, he continued. At the same time, we are called always to have a sense of the dignity of every human person, and thus, plans that have been talked about at some levels of having a wider, indiscriminate, massive deportation across the country would be something that would be incompatible with Catholic doctrine. With a political science doctorate from Stanford University, McElroy is considered by some Catholics to be a leading intellectual closely aligned with Francis, and by others, too direct at times on secular politics. Soon after Donald Trump's first presidential inauguration in 2017, he said, "We must all become disruptors," citing the use of the military to deport undocumented people and the portrayals of refugees as enemies and Muslims as forces of fear rather than as children of God. The significance of the appointment to an archdiocese still bruised by a major sexual abuse and mismanagement scandal that broke in 2018 drew sharp reactions. Pope Francis is sending a pastor, not a message, to Washington, said John Carr, a former longtime lobbyist for the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops on peace and justice issues. Cardinal McElroy will be principled, not political. His priorities will be moral, not ideological. He will be civil, but not silent in challenging the administration when their policies threaten the poor and vulnerable. For those who have long disagreed with what they see as McElroy's lesser emphasis on core elements of Catholicism, doctrine, tradition, and sexual orthodoxy, the Vatican's announcement was a disappointment. It is an appointment that we are unafraid to call terrible. Traditionalist blogger Luigi, it's Luigi. It's a different Luigi. Luigi Casalini of the Messa in Latino. That's Luigi Casalini of the Messa in Latino, Latin Mass, wrote on his blog on Monday. Oh no, a Catholic blogger in conflict with the Vatican. The choice, he says, feels like a childish revenge for Trump recently naming conservative activist and Francis critic Brian Birch to be U.S. ambassador to the Vatican. Yes, that's what motivated, as opposed to taking Catholicism seriously. Why would a pope do that? The 70-year-old McElroy replaces Cardinal Wilton Gregory, the first African-American cardinal. Maybe that's not great. Gregory's long career inside the church includes overseeing the landmark Dallas Charter, an agreement crafted after the Catholic sexual abuse scandals erupted publicly in the early 2000s. It established zero tolerance for priests. At 77, Gregory is 2 years past the standard retirement age for bishops. I didn't realize that. The Vatican said Monday it had accepted his resignation. Gregory was brought to the Archdiocese of Washington, which includes D.C. and suburban and rural parts of southern Maryland, in 2019 and replaced Cardinal Donald W. Wuerl, W-U-E-R-L. Do I have that right? He was seen as a church loyalist and a steady moderate who could restore trust after the crisis wrought by former D.C. Archbishop and former Cardinal Theodore E. McCarrick. McCarrick, once one of the most popular and influential U.S. Catholic leaders, was expelled from the priesthood by Francis after multiple men said he sexually abused them as youths or harassed them as seminarians or young priests. McCarrick was charged in Wisconsin and Massachusetts, but was found not mentally competent to stand trial. What a mess. McElroy is seen as a formidable theologian who has fiercely defended Francis in the wake of attacks by traditionalists. He's equally viewed as a promulgator of unity who has denounced, quote, a profound sickness in the soul of American political life, unquote, and sought to defend the country's, quote, core democratic consensus. People are coming toward each other in the life of the church, looking first at that label. What are you? Where do you stand in the warlike culture politics of our country? McElroy said during a panel last May. Ned Delacy, maybe Delacy? No idea how you'd pronounce that one, but he worked with McElroy as director of the church's lobbying arm in California and said the cardinal was well known for reaching out to people of various political views both within and outside of the church. People who agree and disagree with him turn to him and seek his perspective on different things because they know he's a brilliant man. Delacy said it's D-O-L-E-J-S-I. What do you think, Delacy? He says, anyway, I could always count on him to have conversations with all different kinds of people, to do that and do it well. McElroy's strong defense of migrant rights may antagonize the incoming Trump administration, and some observers say the timing of the Vatican's decision on the new archbishop, just 2 weeks before the inauguration, is no coincidence. That should get dramatic music too, but we don't have time. McElroy's nomination is a very clear message. Says who? Says Massimo Fagioli. How do you like that? F-A-G-G-I-O-L-I. A Catholic theologian at Villanova University. It's a high-profile response to the current political situation in America, and there's no denying it. But he doesn't say whether it's good or bad. Yet the cardinal may have limited influence on the national debate, according to Alejandro Bermudez, former head of the large Spanish-language Catholic news agency ACI Prensa, and former head of the conservative Catholic News Agency. The bottom line is that despite the significant emblematic statement of the appointment, McElroy's real practice influence, real practice, maybe practical, it says practice, real practice influence over Trump's policies will be minimal. That's probably true, Bermudez said. The U.S. government, both at the legislative and executive levels, see the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, not the Archdiocese of Washington, as its counterpart. Interesting, too. Marianne Duddy Burke, executive director of Dignity USA, sounds good, which advocates for LGBTQ Catholics' inclusion in the church, is optimistic. She says McElroy has in the past come up with very creative solutions, such as working out a way for Catholic organizations in San Diego to cover the health insurance of domestic partners without specifying their relationship. Like Jesus, he found a third way, she said on Monday. Wow. San Diego is a politically diverse diocese and easily as politically diverse as Washington, and some Catholic leaders noted McElroy's record of speaking out on public issues, though not in a partisan way. Must be a plus for him there. In politics, he'll offer a smart and distinctive Catholic voice with a record of putting the poor and vulnerable first while seeking opportunities for dialogue and engagement, said Kim Daniels, who has advised both the Vatican and the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops and now heads Georgetown University's initiative on Catholic social thought and public life. He faces challenges stemming from the Archdiocese's recent rocky years. The Catholic news site The Pillar reported last month that it has a multi-million-dollar annual operating deficit. I guess the diocese does. Now, not The Pillar, although maybe they do too. But that would be less interesting. After a news conference Monday at St. Matthew, Gregory said both the McCarrick scandal and the pandemic shutdowns, when people stopped attending in person and giving dropped sharply, hurt the church's finances, but things are, or were anyway, says they were improving. Patricia McGuire, president of Trinity Washington University, Catholic school in Northeast D.C., praised Gregory's pastoral nature, but said that scandal had pushed some faithful Catholics out of the church forever and left those who remain more skeptical. She said the new leader would need, first and foremost, to be savvy about communicating what the Catholic Church teaches, especially in a Trump administration, McGuire added. Trump poses challenges for all of us. He claims to be pro-life, but he's not. We need all bishops to call that out. Moreover, the immigration issues are huge in terms of the dignity of human life. McElroy's selection places him in the nation's capital just as Trump is moving back into the White House and promising mass deportations of undocumented migrants. U.S. bishops have been relatively quiet on the issue while waiting to see how he actually proceeds. And can't blame him for that, I suppose, wanting to see what actually happens. I can't think of a better candidate for the job in the nation's capital, said the Reverend Tom Reese, a senior analyst at Religion News Service. He is bright, articulate, and clearly a big supporter of Francis and supports his concerns that the church should be on the side of the poor and the marginalized. You know, it's a good idea. McElroy, a fifth-generation San Franciscan by birth, has said he felt called to the priesthood as a boy. According to a bio in the San Diego Diocese website, he went to seminary in high school, but thought it was best to further his education outside the church. He attended Harvard University, and graduated in 3 years with a degree in U.S. history. He then went to Stanford, where he got a master's in U.S. history and the doctorate in political science. He has been one of the more active U.S. bishops on hosting and supporting synods, information gathering sessions where all Catholics are supposed to enter into dialogue. In 2023, he made news when he wrote in America magazine that the Pope has called Catholics to radical inclusion, and that one way the church needs to change in response to that call is to allow more worshipers to take communion. Catholic tradition says that people who have sex outside heterosexual marriage are in a state of grave sin and thus can't receive communion. Well, they've been a little flexible with that, I think, and that's good. McElroy said the church needs to rethink this emphasis on sexual activity. The effect of the tradition that all sexual acts outside of marriage constitute objectively grave sin has been to focus the Christian moral life disproportionately upon sexual activity, he wrote. That's a good point. Sexual activity, while profound, isn't the heart of Christian truths. This should change. I can't disagree with that. I'm not allowed. I mean, no right to disagree. But it sounds like a sensible approach to making religion more relevant to modern life. And again, a good reminder, for instance, that conservatism in general here in the United States appears a little too tied up in that too. Like maybe there are some other things you should pay attention to besides sex, who's having it, and how. Like that and what's in whose pants if they want to play on the girls' volleyball team. Yeah, just saying, you guys are a little obsessed with that. All right. I think that's an important thing to watch. Not usually, entirely within our purview here, but I think that makes some sense and could be impactful over the next couple of years. So, okay. That could be very important and might not otherwise have gained our notice. So I'm pleased to have been able to shoehorn that in. There's a couple more minutes here. And let's see, what else can we include in the record for today and make some sense? I don't know if we would be able to get all the way through anything particularly long. But all right, maybe we'll wind up our, for now, January 6th discussion, because we started it yesterday. And, we didn't give it great emphasis, but there's so many reflections on January 6th. I thought I might try this one too, from Don Moynihan, who usually makes good points and sums things up nicely. January 6th and the path not taken. At key moments, Republicans were unwilling to defend democracy, and now, of course, they'll be entirely unwilling. 4 years ago, we lived through a pivot point, more pivoting. History could have gone one way, but went another. For about a 1 month period after January 6th, way back when, everyone seemed truly appalled. This is the big observation we've been seeing from just about everybody. There was that period wherein even Republicans knew something had gone horribly wrong. People passing around with great relish screenshots of Eric Erickson's tweet from that very day saying, arrest these protesters, shoot them, waive the rules, throw people in jail. That went away pretty quickly. At that moment, though, America was poised to consign Trumpism to the dustbin of history, and instead Trump will return to the White House. If Trump's first impeachment revealed the deep corruption in his mode of governing, the second impeachment revealed the weakness and complacency of American democratic institutions. After January 6th, much of civil society, the media, and Trump's own party rejected the unprecedented effort by a mob to interfere with the certification of the election. Trump was judged responsible for encouraging this mob, both on the day itself and for months before. With a series of lies about American democracy, many in the Trump administration resigned, including cabinet officials. I mean, those are the signals we're supposed to look for, right? Corporations said they would no longer fund Republicans who voted to overturn the election. Trump was kicked off social media. He seemed to be heading to a status of a political pariah. And then I will never understand how January 6th was not the end of Trump. So what happened? The blame largely lies with Republican political leaders. Mitch McConnell punted on ending the career of a guy he detests. Kevin McCarthy decided to resurrect Trump out of pure self-interest and got nowhere with it, of course. John Roberts and other Republicans on the Supreme Court extended a measure of retroactive legitimacy for Trump's actions leading up to January 6th. McConnell laid the blame for January 6th squarely at the feet of Trump. In private, he said things like, "If this isn't impeachable, then I don't know what is," and indicated that he expected bipartisan support for a vote to convict Trump. In the Senate, McConnell publicly excoriated Trump. And then, of course, you know what ends up happening. I expect bipartisan support to remove, except for me. I'm not going to do it. He does excoriate him. There is no question that President Trump is practically and morally responsible for provoking the events of that day. The leader of the free world cannot spend weeks thundering that shadowy forces are stealing our country and then feign surprise when people believe him and do reckless things. Oh well. And yet McConnell refused to vote to convict. 7 of his colleagues did, and with McConnell's leadership, more would have done so, potentially enough to get the supermajority needed. With conviction, the Senate could have also taken the vote to block Trump from running again. Doing so would have ended Trump as a political power, maybe. McConnell was clearly considering this option. In an oral history interview at the time the House was impeaching Trump, McConnell said, "But apparently you can impeach somebody after they leave office." I told you that. And if that happens, then there's a second vote in the Senate, which only has to pass by simple majority, that prevents that person from seeking office again. So he could not only be impeached, but also eliminated from the possibility of a comeback for this office. So it's significant. But in the end, McConnell protected Trump from punishment. It was not just the refusal to vote to convict. After a swift House impeachment, he pushed to delay the Senate trial. He opposed the Senate joining in a congressional investigation of January 6th. He endorsed Trump in 2024, although this matters little except to further diminish McConnell's dignity, as it was clear by this point that the Republican Party was Trump's and McConnell's time of influence was at an end. McConnell saw Trump with complete clarity, but suggested he was someone else's problem. We have a criminal justice system in this country. We have civil litigation, and former presidents are not immune from being held accountable by either one. But guess what? About that, 4 years on, the criminal justice system failed to hold Trump accountable. In 2024, the Supreme Court kicked the legs out of legal investigation of Trump's actions by saying that, in fact, Trump was immune in his efforts to use the Justice Department and his vice president to overturn the election. Put alongside SCOTUS's reversal of the state court decision declaring that Trump's role in the insurrection disqualified him from office by violating the 14th Amendment, and it is hard to conclude that the Republican majority would ever block Trump's return. Kevin McCarthy, we'll just say this before we go, deserves an equal share of the blame and perhaps an even greater share of opprobrium. McCarthy led the majority of House Republicans who voted to oppose the 2020 election results. You might say this was a symbolic act, which was not going to alter the outcome, but what exactly did the act symbolize? Coming just hours after the ransacking of the chambers by those seeking exactly that outcome that McCarthy endorsed with his vote, most Republicans made clear they stood with the rioters and not with democracy. Immediately after the attack on the Capitol, McCarthy told Republicans he would push Trump to resign. I've had it with this guy. But he saw his goal of becoming House Speaker could be enhanced by supporting Trump. The pro-MAGA core of the party would follow Trump no matter what, and there was no meaningful opposition. From a purely political calculus, McCarthy was right. Of the 10 Republicans who voted to impeach Trump, only 2 remain in office, while those who voted to overturn the election have faced no lasting punishment. And, of course, what they're doing to Liz Cheney, totally beyond the pale. And yet, there he goes, very shortly thereafter, down to Mar-a-Lago to kiss the ring. It's really rather amazing. There's more, of course.
Listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
But our time is at an end, and it's time to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. He'll take you further into this, I'm sure, and lots of other stories from around the country and around the world, starting off with Kamala Harris as the personification of the return of the peaceful transfer of power. Good thing, bad thing? Well, work it out with justice. Next. We'll see you tomorrow.